true. I have no idea how true this is. But if this is true, in my opinion, it's one of those rip-off type of scam type of pay-per-view events. So apparently, because I'm looking at like all these sources and articles online, and everything keeps saying that Andy Ruiz is going to be making his return against Chris Arreola on May 1st. And it's going to be held in a place called Dignity Health Sports Park in Carson, California, on PBC, and it's gonna be a pay-per-view event. It's for $49.99, right? $50, $50 to watch Andy Ruiz make his comeback against Chris Arreola, and on the undercard is gonna have Araceli Lara versus this Thomas fella, and some guy named Iguodaro. These are featherweights. I don't really pay attention to featherweight, so I don't know who the hell these guys are. I'm keeping it 100 with you, but I call this a scam if this is true, if this fight happens and you're paying $50, because Chris Arreola is washed up. Chris Arreola is absolutely washed up. This is an easy fight for Andy Ruiz Jr., in my opinion. Okay, this is one of those fights that needs to be on free TV. This is one of those easy fights. And, you know, I don't blame Andy Ruiz for taking this fight because he had two back-to-back tough fights with Anthony Joshua. So this is like a comeback fight. He hasn't fought since 2019. So I don't really have a problem with him facing an easy opponent like Chris Arreola. My issue is, why make it a pay-per-view? Because this is not worth pay-per-view. The undercard, Araceli Lara is washed up himself. So this fight is basically a card with washed up opposition. I mean, you got Chris Arreola at heavyweight challenging former unified champion Araceli Lara. Andy Ruiz Jr., and he's washed up. And then you got Araceli Lara in there, but he's washed up. He's an old over-the-hill fighter himself. He looked like shit in his last couple fights. He's clearly washed up. So this is basically a card filled with washed up, former good, decent type of fighters, okay? Again, I have no problem with this fight being with Andy Ruiz specifically facing Chris Arreola, because this is a comeback fight. So he's obviously going to fight somebody who's low caliber. My only issue is the fact that they're charging this much. They're making it a pay-per-view. But I understand why they're doing it. This fight's going to be taking place on May 1st, 5 days before Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo is this big festive thing that, you know, Mexican people do. They celebrate. This is the reason why Floyd Mayweather Jr. used to always fight in the month of May. And he used to always fight against Mexicans in the month of May, because he knew that that it was Cinco de Mayo month. The month of May is the month of Mexicans, right? They celebrate this big holiday, Cinco de Mayo, in the month of May. So he knew, Floyd Mayweather Jr., that by facing a Mexican opposition, a lot of these Mexican people will be paying money to watch the pay-per-view, hoping that Mexican fighter would beat Floyd Mayweather Jr. So it was a really good way to scam the public and try to get as much money as you can from them. So this is why they're doing this. They're making this a pay-per-view event because they're trying to scam the Mexican people. They're like, oh, look, we got two Mexican fighters, two Mexican heavyweights, Andy Ruiz Jr. and Chris Arreola, fighting each other. And they're Mexican, and one of them is a former unified champion. So let's make it a pay-per-view event so we could scam the boxing public and have them pay us a bunch of money and make all this money. But in reality, this is a fight that does not belong in pay-per-view, because it's not pay-per-view worthy, and it's an easy fight for Andy Ruiz Jr. It's an easy fight, okay? I hope I'm wrong. I hope this fight becomes fight of the fucking year. I hope they go Mexican style against each other. I hope Chris Arreola actually fights fire with fire and doesn't counterpunch. No, I hope Andy Ruiz fights fire with fire. I hope I'm dead wrong. I hope that when I look back in this fight, I'm like, you know what? It was worth paying the $50 to watch this fight happen, because you know what? With their styles, maybe Chris Arreola gets motivated. Maybe he's like, you know what? I'm facing Andy Ruiz Jr., a former champion. If I beat him, it'll do great things for my career. It could resurrect my career. Maybe it'll motivate him, and he'll come in strong, and he'll come in fighting hard. I hope I'm right, and I hope that he does that. But in my opinion, I think Chris Arreola is washed up. I think he's a has-been. I think he's literally a has-been. He's been washed up, and he was never great to begin with. He was a mediocre type of heavyweight. Okay? I just feel like they're ripping the public off, charging people $50 when this is a fight that belongs on free television. This belongs on free television. And that's all I got to say. Peace.